Hello there and welcome to my guide for painting Betty Ross and General Ross for Marvel Zombies. As you can see, the first thing I did was sprayed Betty with a matte white spray and General Ross with a matte black spray. Both these sprays are from Colourforge. I'm going to start with Betty and I'm going to paint her trousers with the Fang. Then I'm going to paint her shoes with a Baden black, along with the Radiation logo on her clipboard. I'll then wash these areas with some Nuln Oil. For General Ross, I'm going to paint his entire uniform with War Flesh, which I'll then wash with some Athonian Camo Shade. While that dries, I'm going to go back to Betty and I'm going to use the Fang to relayer everything, avoiding the recesses. This will be followed by a 50-50 mix of the Fang and Russ Grey, followed by a final highlight of Russ Grey just by itself. Her shoes will be highlighted with some Corvus Black. I'm then going to use a little bit of Lothern Blue just to paint the shirt that's underneath her coat, which I'll highlight with a 50-50 mix of Lothern Blue and Blue Horror. To paint the lab coat, I'm going to use some Grey Seer, followed by a 50-50 mix of Grey Seer and Matte White, with a final highlight of Matte White. I'm then going to continue with the Radiation symbol, and with that I'm going to use some Avalan Sunset, followed by a highlight of Flash Gets Yellow. The rest of the clipboard will be painted with Iron Hand Steel, which I'll give a wash with some Nuln Oil. I want to paint the skin for both Betty and General Ross at the same time, so I'm going to move back to General Ross and I'm going to give him a dry brush with some War Flesh, followed by a second dry brush of War Boss Green. Next I'm going to start adding the camouflage patches on the uniform. I'm not going to go mad with it, just a few bits here and there, and I'm going to use Elysian Green. I'll then highlight these areas with a 50-50 mix of Elysian Green and Nurgling Green. I'm also going to add a few brown patches with some Dryad Bark, and they'll get highlighted with some Catachan Flesh. General Ross also has a tiny little white shirt poking out, so we're going to start that with some Grey Seer, and highlight it with some Matte White. On the card he's got a few bits of gold on him, so we're going to use some Retributor armor for that. That's basically a name badge and the 6 stars that are on his lapels. I'll then neaten up all the areas that are going to be black with some Abaddon Black. That's his belt, his gun, and his boots. He's also got a watch, so I'm going to do the watch strap as well. All these areas will then get highlighted with some Corvus Black. And his belt buckle and watch face will get painted with some Iron Hand Steel and washed with some Nuln Oil. Now I'm going to start working on the skin. For Betty, I'm going to use some Cadian Flesh Tone. And for General Ross, I'm going to use Bugman's Glow. All the skin and that gold will then get a wash with some Reichland Flesh Shade. Once that wash has dried, we'll start to relayer the skin on General Ross with some more Bugman's Glow, making sure we avoid all of the recesses. But before we go any further, we're going to paint the eyes, so I'm going to use some Abaddon Black for that, followed by some Matte White, and then another bit of Abaddon Black just to dot the pupils. Then we'll do a 50-50 mix of Bugman's Glow and Cadian Flesh Tone for the first set of highlights on General Ross. This will be followed by Cadian Flesh Tone just by itself, and we're also going to use Cadian Flesh Tone to start neaten up Betty as well, making sure you avoid all of those recesses. We'll then highlight with a 50-50 mix of Cadian Flesh Tone and Kislev Flesh, followed by a final highlight of Kislev Flesh. I'm then going to paint General Ross's hair with some Grey Seer, which I'll highlight with a 50-50 mix of Grey Seer and Matte White. Betty's hair will be painted with Abaddon Black, which will be dry brushed with some Corvus Black. Betty's base will be painted with Iron Hand Steel, And then I'm going to use a little bit of Iron Warriors just to pick out a few minor details to give the base a little bit of a variation. For General Ross, I'm going to use some Dryad Bark to paint his base, using Dawnstone to paint the rock he's standing on. His base will be dry brushed with some Gothor Brown, and the rock will be highlighted with some Grey Seer. I'll then paint their rims Abaddon Black, and then I'll finally wash both bases with some watered down Agrax Earthshade. And once that's dry, that's Betty and General Ross finished. They are a pair of lovely models and they are super simple to paint. In fact, they're also super quick to paint as well, only clocking in around about 2 hours. I've really enjoyed painting all these bystanders, and these are the last two for the core box set. And I think CMON have done a really good job at making them all stand out on the actual board. If you followed this video, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you found it useful. And if you did find it useful, why not give the channel a subscribe, the video a thumbs up, maybe a share if you're so inclined. And thanks again for watching. Goodbye for now, and I'll see you on the next one.